Enforcing a boundary in your marriage is something that you should do when you're trying to save the marriage, not when you're taking steps towards divorce. And I think that this is one of the critical errors in how boundaries are so often taught. The framing is just naturally assumed that by the time you need a boundary, you also ought to probably start thinking about divorce. And so even the enforcement of the boundary then gets put into that context. You're having to consider what is the furthest end of that or else that I'm putting on my boundary here? This thing where I say, if you do this, here's the consequence, which is how boundaries are taught. It's limits and consequences, right? And so when you hit this limit, here's the consequence. But because we're waiting to enforce boundaries so much of the time until we're already deeply into a season of hurt or disappointment or frustration, a lot of times the feelings that we are using as the measure for telling us that we need boundaries are too intense to what a normal consequence could inflict on the other side. Let me put it another way. If you feel that your child has greatly misbehaved, then you're going to give them a severe consequence to teach them not to misbehave. But right there we have a problem because boundaries are not teaching tools in the ways that consequences are teaching tools for a kid. And although there is some natural feedback that carries over there, because just as kids learn from consequences, so do adults. So that is true. But the goal is never the consequence. The goal is protection. And this is, I think, a bedrock problem with how boundaries are taught is that they are always framed on the scale of steps you take towards the end of the relationship. All I'm going to say is, I think there's a better way. And that's what I want to explore. I want to define an approach to boundaries that slants you towards the marriage instead of away from it. So hopefully we can do that. Either way, see you on the next one.